It's Stacy here, coming to you live from True Girl TV. And I have breaking news. It's time for this month's coaching session. Okay. Now, I won't be your news anchor, but let me just start off by saying that I am so thankful for you guys. I'm genuinely grateful for the time we get to spend together each month. Maybe all that thankfulness gave you a hint as to what we'll be talking about. After all, November is usually when we're reminded to just stop and give thanks, to remember the people and things we've been blessed with, and to express our gratitude for them. We have so many things to be thankful for. Even when there seems to be lots of bad things happening, we must remember to notice all the good things that are happening too. We can always show gratitude. There is something to be grateful for in every single situation. Don't believe me? I'll prove it. Your mom won't let you hang out with your friends until you clean your room? Well, be grateful that you have a room to clean, a space to rest and call your own. Did you get a bad grade on your test at school? Well, you could always be grateful that you even have a school to go to, a place to learn. You could also be grateful that that isn't the only test you'll take all year and that you'll have other chances to get a better grade. Gratitude is an attitude. We get to choose whether we're going to focus on the bad parts of situations or on the good parts. It's our choice to wake up and start counting the blessings and gifts we have all around us. Now, something that's even more important than noticing those gifts is seeing who actually gives them. Where do the good things in our lives come from? Let's look to the Bible to find our answer. James 1:17 says, "Whatever is good and perfect is a gift coming down to us from God our Father, who created all the lights in the heavens. He never changes or casts a shifting shadow." Did you catch the answer? Every good gift comes from God. Now, maybe you're like, hold up, my parents give me most of my gifts, so what are you talking about? Let me explain. God uses the people in our lives and the situations in our lives to allow His gifts to get from Him to us. He's able to use anything He wants to get the good things He has for us to us. It's just simple as that. But never forget that those good things ultimately come from Him. It's important to remember to thank God for His gifts and to practice being grateful. This shows God how much we appreciate all He does for us, and it helps us experience the joy that thankfulness brings. One way I like to practice gratitude is by spending some time meditating on God's goodness and remembering the things He's blessed me with. One of my favorite ways to do this is by using His gift of creativity. Now, if you've been using a True Girl subscription box, you know that each month we provide a coloring meditation page. And our goal with that is just to have you meditate on God's Word as you have some fun coloring and being creative. This month, we've decided to get creative, and we're going to take that coloring activity and turn it into a painting activity. And we want you to focus on the good gifts that God has given you as you paint. To help get you started, I've got a special guest with me, and she's going to give us a quick tutorial on painting and meditating on God's goodness. If you've ever read True Girl books like Just Call Me Kate or The 1 Year Mother-Daughter Devo, then you've definitely heard from this amazing lady before, all right? Her name is Janet Mylin. She has also authored a book for moms, and she is just an amazing artist. So without further ado, I'm going to pop it on over to Janet.
Thanks, Stacy. That was such a great teaching on gratitude. What a great reminder of where all the good things come from in our lives. It comes from the Lord, and I'm so grateful for that. Watercolor makes me grateful because one trick about watercolor is sometimes you don't feel like you're totally in control because the water moves the color around, and sometimes the color goes in places you don't really expect it to go. And when that happens in my paintings, I'm reminded that even when I feel out of control, God is always working something beautiful out of it. And so every time I paint and things get a little bit wonky or things don't go quite like I want them to, I'm reminded that this is going to be beautiful no matter what. And I think about that with God's goodness. So every time I'm painting and I see that things aren't going quite like I want them to, and I feel like, I don't know if this is going to be beautiful or not, I try to remind myself that even when things aren't going quite like I want them to, or I feel totally out of control, God is always working something beautiful behind the scenes, and it always ends up being a beautiful thing because he's always working, he's always moving. And that's one reason why when I'm painting with watercolor especially, I feel very grateful that God is much bigger than I am. So first things first, you have a new watercolor kit. Isn't that the best feeling? You have all these pretty colors in front of you and you're just like, what a world of possibilities right here in front of me. And I want to show you how I prepare my watercolor kits when they're new. I'll set that aside. The first thing I do is I add water. If you've ever heard me talk about watercolor before, I always say the biggest mistake people make with watercolor is they don't add enough water. And I literally drench my watercolor palette with a spray bottle. You could also use your paintbrush and just kind of drizzle water in there, but I make puddles on top of my watercolors. So that may make you feel very uncomfortable because you've never done that before. And maybe the colors might run together, and that's okay. Let them run together. It's important to use a lot of watercolor because that's the thing that gives watercolor the character that people love when they see it and they see the different nuances and shades and all of that. That's the beauty of watercolor. So we have to let watercolor be watercolor. So I soak it, I drench it. The second thing I do when I get a new watercolor kit, or actually if I get a new marker kit or colored pencil kit, anything like that, a new set, is I like to make a swatch sheet. So it's just a sheet of paper and the watercolor paper, and I just actually paint them out in the same order that they are in my palette. Because one thing about watercolor that's tricky is watercolor dries about 50% lighter than it is when it's wet. And so it's really valuable to know what your colors are gonna do when they're dry. And you can kind of see on your swatch sheet, you can see like, well, black isn't really black, it's kind of a gray. And you would have to add less water to make it more black. And you just learn about your colors that way. So I would create a swatch sheet. It's super satisfying and also really helpful to have. Okay, well, to me, it made a lot of sense to paint an acorn today. I went out in my yard actually and got these little guys. We have a humongous oak tree in our front yard, and these acorns are everywhere. We don't dare walk out in the front yard in our bare feet because we're walking on acorns and it's a little ouchy. So, but I grabbed these guys as my models. So I'm gonna set them there, my inspiration. And I feel like too with the acorns, you have your little acorn in your box and he's adorable. And I know that for Dana and myself, a valuable portion of scripture for us comes out of Isaiah 61 verses 1 through 3. And it goes through a whole thing about setting people free and about God creating beauty out of hard things. And it ends with that these people would be called oaks of righteousness, a planting of the Lord, a display of his splendor. That huge tree in my yard came out of this tiny acorn and it is miraculous. So let's paint an acorn. I feel like there are 3 different types of artists. And the first artist, the first person I'm gonna speak to today is the just go for it type of artist, where you don't really wanna plan a whole lot. You just have the brush in your hand and you're like, just give me the paint. I just wanna start painting acorns. So I have a jar of water and a paper towel and my watercolor set, and I'll show you what I do. So I get my brush really wet, and sometimes it's a little too wet, so I have to dab it off. And I'm just gonna start painting acorns on this sheet, and they're not going to be perfect acorns that look like they just fell from the tree. We're gonna get kind of colorful with them and just start painting them. So I'm gonna actually paint a pink acorn first. And all I need to make sure I have is a top that's a little bigger, a bottom that's a little smaller. You can even put the little point on it if you want to. And then a little stem on the top. So there's a pink acorn. And let's see, I think, let's do a blue one. So you just can paint different colored acorns. Same technique every time. I'm gonna show you something really cool here. Wider acorns, skinnier acorns, a little nub on the top. Okay, now what you can do when you have wet watercolor on your paper is you can add color into it. So with this blue one, I'm gonna grab, let's see, actually I'm gonna grab that pink again. It's from my palette, it's wet and puddly. I'm gonna dab it into this blue and look what happens. just spreads around in the water. That's why you need so much water for your watercolor, because that's where the watercolor kind of magic happens. So let's see, I guess we can do a brown one. Seems appropriate. All right, let's do a brown acorn, because you know, they're mostly brown. With this one, I'm just gonna do a lighter top, one shade of brown for the top, and another shade of brown for the bottom. You see how that runs together a little bit? You gotta be okay with that. That's where we get to a point of realizing that even when things feel out of control, it's still gonna be okay. It's gonna be beautiful. I'm gonna make this a longer, skinnier acorn. So this is just you're creating the outline and the paint all with your brush. This is for the person who's like, I don't wanna draw anything. I just wanna put color on paper. This technique, the just go for it technique. Okay, so that's the just go for it. You can just grab colors, paint these acorns any color you want, because an acorn is a really specific shape, so you can paint them any color and people will still know what it is. All right, that's the first technique. The second one is, and incidentally, you should know, you could dry this with a hairdryer right now and dry them instantly, but I don't have one, so we're not gonna do that. The second technique is people who wanna draw it first. So this, I just did like a really big acorn with some of the detail of the cap, and it's nothing too fancy, but there's already it adds detail to your painting just by drawing. So I'm gonna use a bigger brush for this one. And let's see, I'm going to do the same thing. So with a pencil, or if you use like a marker, and I don't care if I go outside the lines, because that's kind of how I live my life. I live outside the lines a little bit. But if you use a marker or a pencil, your watercolor will let that show underneath, and that's what makes it really cool, because you get the detail of the drawing underneath it. You just have to make sure if you use markers that you use a marker that won't smear. So the ones that you can wash away, washable markers, are not gonna work at all, because they're going to smear everywhere. All right, so let's do this. Painting this in here. If I didn't have enough water, then this would be much, much harder to move this color around. There we go. And then if I wanted to add like shading, like make it darker places, I go back with more paint and just dab it in there. Isn't that cool? I'm gonna use the same color for the stem. All right. And actually with this one, I'm gonna add some green, because I learned that before acorns turn brown, they're green. So this one maybe is just beginning to turn brown, or just losing its green. So if you want to draw first, you can do that. If you want more of a detailed, specific kind of look, then use a pencil or a marker that's not going to smear, or a pen, and draw it out and then paint within your drawing. All right, I'm gonna flip this page. Again, you could use a hairdryer and dry that, or we could just flip it, pretend it never happened. All right, the last one we have is the draw last. So this acorn I've already painted earlier today, and you can see how this dried so much lighter than some of the colors you saw me putting on the other acorns. Now what you could do is you could take a marker and you could draw on this. So a lot of times when you draw your outline second. So a lot of people, when they draw acorns, what they do actually for the texture is they do like a crisscross pattern. Let me see, maybe my other side of my marker is gonna work better for me. Yeah, okay. It's just a really simple way to get the texture on the top of an acorn without drawing all the little individual pieces of it. So we could do that, and we could decide, this isn't just any acorn, this is a cartoon acorn. So we can draw eyes on it afterwards. He's looking over there. Let's see. A little happy mouth, a little nose. And then I always like to put tiny legs on things because it's super funny. So, and I don't know, I guess we'll give him arms. How about that? He's got little mitten hands because that seems appropriate for an acorn. And then we'll have another one over here. I think I put his thumbs on the same side on both hands, so that's a win. All right. But you could draw after your painting and you can make it into anything you wanted. You know what could be really cool is if you cut this watercolor paper into bookmarks and painted some acorns on it and then wrote a scripture verse over top of it after it's dry and then gave it to someone, gave it as a gift to a friend, or put it in your family's stockings for Christmas. That could be really special. But after watercolor is dry, you can literally paint or draw over it with pretty much anything. And it's a really cool way to get another technique with watercolor. Lots of options with watercolor. I want to tell you that sometimes I just put color on paper when I'm painting and it looks more like the swatches, the swatch sheet, than it does an acorn. Because sometimes I just need to not have any kind of pressure on me or expectations to create something specific. The act of just putting pretty colors on paper and watching the water move around is something that brings me to a point of where I can kind of just do that and also meditate on God's goodness and his character and his love for me. So don't have pressure on yourselves that you have to make something that looks like something. Watercolor on paper is beautiful, no matter what it becomes once it's on the paper. And that's another reason why watercolor gives me a real attitude of gratitude, because I find so much joy in just the process of it, even if I don't make something that looks like anything specific. I hope you dive into your watercolor kits and have a great time with it. And don't be afraid to add tons and tons of water. It's not going to ruin anything. It's going to make it even more enjoyable for you. And I hope you have a day that is full of gratitude for God's goodness.
I don't know about you, but I can't wait to get my watercolor kit out. This month, I want to challenge you to practice gratitude. Thank God for all he's done. And remember, gratitude is an attitude.